Total subscription from Wednesday's 220 billion Naira T-bills auction stood at 366.2 billion Naira, with allotment at 173.24 billion Naira. Now, demand is skewed towards the 364-day paper, which cleared at a stop rate of 16.5%, up 62 basis points from the 15.8% cutoff at the previous auction. Chuka Nwachukwu, chief dealer and head of trading at the United Bank for Africa, joins me now live in our Lagos studio for more market movements. Chuka, thanks a lot for joining us on the show today. It's been quite the busy week we've had so far. We had the OMO auction on Tuesday. We also had a T-bills auction on Wednesday. Walk us through the details from yesterday's T-bills auction before we now get into liquidity and how the auction settlement has also impacted the market.
Thank you, David. The OMO auction was as a result of liquidity. There was the system liquidity as at Tuesday morning was in over 2.2 trillion. And of course, we expected CBN to act, based on its stance on inflation. And so there was an OMO auction where 600 billion was on offer. Subscription was about 2.1 trillion. And that was the amount that was sold. So we saw rates, came out around, 22.7, and then, so that's kind of like, chart the course for the trades, for Wednesday trading, where we also have the NTB auction. About 220 billion was offered. Though it was less, about 176 billion was sold. However, subscription was about 300 billion. And so we saw, about 50 or 60 basis point, movement in the yield, from 15.55 levels from the last auction.
But this yield movement is still around the range we had earlier forecasted at about 16.5%.
Yeah, absolutely, but again, the thing is, most of the activities is obviously on the OMO side, because of the the yield. So 23 levels, all in should be around 26, 27, which is above the SDF and a benchmark, CBN borrowing benchmark. So for any investor, that is obviously would be your number one priority. Due to the fact that bills on the yield on the NTB is very low.
But we still see the 2033 still remain investors' delight at this moment, trading at about 17.25.
So on the bond side, basically what we see on the bond side is more of a bearish sentiment, right? So yield has dropped. Those who bought around the 18, 19, 20 levels, are just cashing in. So you've seen yield on the bond side around the 15 levels, maybe upper 15, and then about 16 levels. So if you bought a bond at 18%, even at 18%, and use around 15% levels, that's huge. So what we see on the bond side is more of a bearish sentiment. Traders, investors selling off, banking their the profit, and then look for the next available investment to make.
Yes, and talking about investment at this moment now, we also in the show earlier had looked at capital flows at this moment, and we're still saying it's the season of hot money, according to the first quarter report. What's your take around the numbers and the sort of representation we have at this moment?
So there's the news on the capital flow is quite encouraging, especially with what government is doing. If you see the first quarter, it is increased to about $5.6 billion. If you judge that to this quarter, last year, comparing it, is much improvement. However, like we've mentioned, 85% is the FPI, hot money. And so it tells you how, our yield, in terms of return on investment, kind of like encourage hot money to come in, investors to come in. Like I just mentioned earlier, if OMO, which predominantly is for the FPIs, right, is around 23.7 levels, and all in is obviously around the 27 levels. So, it makes more sense considering where the inflation figure is.
Yes. And wrapping up the conversation now, before we also get into what we can expect for the rest of this week in terms of yield movement and also looking at further auctions and movements in the market next week. But let's touch on FX as well now. We have talked about how strong the Naira might pan out for the rest of this quarter. As of this morning, we were seeing the range at the parallel market now going back to that 1,540 range. Your take around the movement here? Yeah,
so the FX market to some extent has been stable. It's been stable between 1534 to 1545 levels, right? And it's currently trading within that range. And so it's also a reflection of what is happening on the fixed income market, the capital flow that we just mentioned about. So I see it within this range. I do not think that anything significant will change, and also it also gives more confidence, investors confident that look, the exchange rate is stable. And most importantly, it's a unified exchange rate. So it's stable, and then you give them more confidence. Again, the reserve is also another another good thing. Reserve is around $39.40 billion dollars. So that obviously will give CBN more more shock absorber, if I might use that word, to defend the Naira.
Yes. And wrapping up the conversation, what should we expect for the rest of this week, and also looking into next week? Auctions inside, what's in the offing?
So we will see on the bill side, especially the 1 year, we will see activity, especially on the OMO side. Okay, so I mean, is elevated yield now. So we see bullish sentiment. Those who lost at the auction, if you check the subscription, especially on the bill side or the NTB, you see that subscription is over 300 billion. What was offered was 220 billion, and then what was sold about 176 billion. So those deficits will obviously come into the secondary market to try to invest. And again, this month we're going to have huge liquidity coming into the system this month, about 2.4 trillion, from OMO maturity, NTB maturity, and bond, coupon will come in, and that obviously is a lot. And so we continue to see pressure on the fixed income market, especially the T-bills, the OMO, and then the bond on the bond side. So next week, we on the bill side, we'll see a bullish sentiment, especially on the OMO side. But for the bond, investors will continue to take profit because of the level of yield, the level at which the yields are now.
We'll leave the conversation here for now. Thank you so much for your time, Chuka. That is Chuka Nwachukwu, Chief Dealer and Head of Trading at UBA.